Welcome to the Fight Podcast with Jake and Nicci Hamilton,
where we discuss the complexities of marriage and manhood through real, raw, personal stories.
We're back at it again, and we are now officially in our 21st year of marriage. 21st year of marriage, Nicci Hamilton.
It's pretty amazing.
You've been a Hamilton for 21 years. And we want to take this time to basically share with you 5 things. Now, there's probably 100 things. We're just going to narrow it down to 5 things we've discussed a little bit that we've learned in 21 years that might be helpful for some of you. So we're going to give our best shot at this and try not to be long-winded. So are you ready for this?
Yeah, no promises on the long-winded.
Okay, and by the way, these are not like in any particular order. It's not like the most important down to the least important. These are just 5 things that we have just felt like have been helpful over the 21 years of marriage, which is really, we're just getting started.
Yeah, the weird thing about, I think, being married for 21 years, at least for me, is that in some ways I feel like I know you so well. And in other ways, I feel like there's so much more I need and want to learn about you, which is the beautiful part about being married for multiple decades, I think.
Well, yeah, I think it's really interesting that I still am finding out things about you.
Also, the beautiful thing about a long marriage is that I knew you when you were a boy. We met when we were maybe 19, I would say.
Yeah, 19, 20, somewhere in there.
And now we have a son who's going to be 18. And so it's this amazing experience of getting to look at our son. And I remember you when you were almost that age. And there's something, that helps me understand my son, because teenagers, wow, that's rough. And B, it reminds me of just you as a young person. And there's something so sweet about that.
Well, because we've been together since we were in our most formative years of adulthood, when you're so young, figuring out life, trying to apply all the things you've experienced over your young age, your young high school experience, junior high experience, trying to make sense of that and put it into work in your life. You're getting to do that with a person that you now have actually been building a life with for 20 years. I mean, next year is the year we will cross the threshold of we will have known each other or been together longer than we've been, longer in our lives. More of our life would have been spent together than apart on earth.
That's really cool.
I think it's awesome.
Not to make it sound all fluffy, like there hasn't been hard times. I mean, we've had really challenging, difficult
No, you've been a very
times.
challenging wife.
Okay.
You've been super challenging. So, I didn't know we were going to be talking about this.
I'm a broken human. So we all have added, both of us have added to the heartache and hardships of being married to one another. There are hard times, but I think the encouragement is if you are married and you're in a sticky situation, I'm guessing you've been married about 8 years, because that's when that real hit, there is something to the 7-year itch.
Yeah.
There's a reason people call it that, and it has a name, because there is something that happens around 7 years.
Yeah, I think Mike Bickle, wasn't he the one that told us? He said you spend the first 7 years first 7 years convinced that you can change the other person. Then you spend the next few realizing you'll never change who they actually are at their core. And then you'll spend the rest of your life either accepting, receiving, and growing with that person, or be miserable.
And that is our story, really, because at 7 years, we were both right there.
Yeah.
And I think we have made the decision to grow together. And that is a decision, and it does take a lot of work, which leads to...
Do you want to do that as point number 1?
Yes.
Okay, so point number 1, things that we've learned in 21 years.
And this took us a long time to learn, I think, and it was a hiccup for us for a while.
Okay. What is it?
Well, for about every 6 months for the first 8 years, maybe 3 months, we would have a huge blowout fight, generally around the same areas, the same topics. And after 8 years of that, you think, oh, this is never going to be over. We're never going to figure this out. Clearly a sign that we're failing in our marriage. we what are we going to do? Like, this is a mess. Like, it's not going to work. This doesn't work.
Yep.
And I think what we've realized now is there are things in our marriage that we will never figure out. There are parts of you and parts of me that are always going to butt heads,
Yeah.
and we're never going to fully agree upon them.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That is actually okay.
Are we doing the commitment to growth? Is that the number we're doing? Which one are we doing? Accepting that there are hard times.
Yeah.
That's the one. I didn't know which one we were going. We're already messing this up.
I started it with number 5.
Okay, we're starting with the last one that we
Yeah.
wrote down. But I mean, I would agree with that. There has to be an acceptance that just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad. And we have a culture that says if it's hard, it's bad. So anything hard, I've got to get rid of. If I'm uncomfortable, I have to get to comfort. If I am not feeling great, I have to get to feeling great. If I'm having a moment where I'm having Nicci calls it a blue funk. I'm having a blue funk, and then I've got to get out of it as quick as possible. And there is a reality that we have to kind of accept seasons of life. Like, really, nature tells us there is a winter, spring, summer, fall. It's very natural to have winters in your marriage. Things start to dry up. Things that used to work don't work. But if we look at the apple tree in the middle of winter and go, oh, it's dead, dig it up, throw it away, we're going to miss out on the harvest that's coming in the spring and the fall, really, for apples. But we're missing out on the fruit that's coming. It's just dormant right now. And the things that we've worked on are actually just in seed form in the ground, ready to bear fruit, but we're going to give up while they're still in the ground and they haven't shown blossom yet, And I feel like that's a massive thing to learn over 21 years. And most people just do not get there. They give up before they see the fruit of all their hard work, which is such a bummer. You work your butt off for 8-10 years and then you're like, and now I'm bailing.
Well, because nobody tells you marriage isn't about your happiness. That's, I think, the number one myth in marriage in culture today is that marriage is not about your happiness.
Yeah.
There is something so amazing about marriage that it also happens with children. It causes you to go to places inside of yourself that you would never go naturally. We don't naturally tend to lean into the hard stuff. We go where it's easy. Marriage forces you to look at those places in your life that you do not want to look at. And I think the saddest thing about divorce is you escape it. You really escape those places that God created for you with another human being to work through. So you never have to, but then you're carrying that broken piece of you around. You're lugging that around for the rest of your life, or until you can, find somebody else who's willing to wrestle that out with you.
Well, yeah. And I think that the big thing that we're talking about here is that there is an acceptance that it is going to be hard. And Nicci says it all the time, wherever you go, there you are. So if your marriage is really rough, you're playing a part in that. There is something in you as well. That it takes two. Like, there's no version of any story I've ever heard where it's like, yeah, unless we're talking again, caveat to every time we say stuff like this, unless you're in a massively abusive relationship, you are in a physically abusive relationship, or you are in abusive cycles, there really is two people playing a part in this marriage relationship. And the difficulty is not just one-sided. It is definitely two-sided. And if you decide to go somewhere else, you're going to have to see those things in another way with someone else down the road, because wherever you go, there you are, which leads us to another point, which is commitment to growth. Like, really, the thing that I can do in a marriage is learn how to grow personally. Now, yes, there's a side of it that we want to be committed to growth in our marriage. I want to continue to learn new tools for communication, how to be able to do that, how to be a better dance partner in the midst of our years together. But really, growth starts with me.
Yeah. And I think this is in multiple areas, like physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We need to be growing in all of these areas. I work out, we eat healthy, we do things to keep ourselves physically strong and in shape and healthy, so that we can be present there for each other and, not die young. thankfully. And also just working on our own mental health and working on our own journeys. And I think that's something that's been so helpful to us in our marriage because it allows you to face those parts of yourself that, oh, maybe aren't as fun to look at, and then bring something more whole to the relationship.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's so many opportunities for us to grow right now. Guys, with YouTube and all and books and audiobooks and all this stuff, there's no reason why anybody on planet Earth in a relationship should not be doing some form of personal growth. You all have it accessible, from physical health to emotional health, psychological health to spiritual health. There, you can do the work. Okay. It's not like, well, I don't have enough money for that. There is tons of resource. We just aren't utilizing it. And I feel like it's a massive thing to say over 21 years that if we both would not have pursued our own personal growth, then, and here's what I see, and maybe I'm seeing it wrong, but usually what happens is if I'm not willing to do my own personal work, it becomes so much easier to blame you for what you're not doing,
Mm.
because I'm not willing to put it in my own life because it's just too hard. It's just too much time, too much work, too much effort. And then it's just easier to be like, well, it is all your fault.
And I think this is something that we've learned over 21 years as well.
Mm-hmm.
If we're having, or, it was like, there's just like this repetitive thing coming up
Absolutely.
between us where I'm feeling super triggered by something you're doing. I think in the beginning of our marriage, I looked at you and thought, what are you doing wrong? And how are you going to fix it? Because you're upsetting me.
Yep.
I have since realized a better question is, whoa, why is this affecting me? What is it in me? What is it in my story that I am being so deeply triggered by? And I will be honest, 9.5 times out of 10, it wasn't you at all. It was something in my story that you just happened to bring up that I needed to work on. And that needed some attention, that needed some grief, that needed me to acknowledge. And in doing that, all of a sudden you're not bugging me anymore. All of a sudden I'm not feeling triggered anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and we say this all the time, right? Like we talk about this a bunch, which is you're going to marry all of your triggers. That is the way God designed it. It's not the devil. It's not the enemy. You will marry every one of your triggers so that you have to look at them every day so that you can decide whether or not you want to walk in healing and fullness of what you were meant and created for. It's not because the other person is trying to hurt you. That is most of the time not true. Most of the time, them being them triggers you in specific ways that you eventually have to look at and deal with. And if you don't want to look at those things, guess what? It's way easier to look across the table and go, you suck. It's your fault. You're awful. You need to change. Instead of going, why is this triggering me so bad? What about them is triggering me? Because I'm in control of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in control of me. I don't have to be triggered. When there's not a violent act happening to me, when there's not something of deep consequences is the wrong word, but when there is not immense trauma coming in my direction, but just their personhood, who they are, how they do things, causes a reaction and a response in me, I have to pay attention to that instead of blame and push it off on them. Because now we're just projecting. Now I'm just projecting my pain onto your body, onto your actions, so that I don't have to take responsibility for it. Which, isn't that so convenient? Like, you can live your whole marriage like that. Won't be fun, and it will definitely not breed deep connection and intimacy, but you can do it. So what else? Clearly defined roles.
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's hard in today's society because we've really changed the gender roles. You have a lot of double working families.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, why should I be the one to take out the trash when we're both working here. So we split everything down the middle and it's not really clearly defined. It's kind of muddied. I think one of the biggest gifts we have always had is a very clearly defined roles. We're very traditional. I'm not saying that you have to have traditional roles in order to make a marriage work. You just have to have defined roles. So there is never a question of who's doing the laundry in our house. I'm clearly doing the laundry. There's never a question when something breaks, who's fixing it. Jake is clearly fixing it. And there's no arguments about those things. And then who's making dinner? I'm in charge of dinner. However, if Jake steps in to help me and he makes dinner, it's not like, well, gee, yeah, about time you made dinner. It's a wow, thank you
That's right.
that you stepped in and helped me. I really appreciate that. So not only does it keep fights from happening, it also opens opportunity for gratefulness when someone steps in and helps in a role that they don't have to.
Right. And I think we are very traditional in this way. And really, what I want to make sure is addressed when we talk about defining roles is the fact that personality plays a lot into this. Like how you grew up, your family of origin, what you experienced growing up, what you hoped a family would be like. This is one of the reasons story is so important to connection in marriage, because we've spent a lot of time figuring out, what do you want that role to be? What part do you want me to play in this dance? And why do you want that? And where does that come from? What are you emotionally and psychologically hoping will take place if I play that role? And what does that mean in the course of the lack that you experienced, or the abundance that you experienced in your growing up? I think it's just another way to learn how your spouse longs to be loved and the role they long to play in connection inside the home. And so that's why it's so hard to be like, and this is how it works. And we draw the line down the middle, and this is how it plays in every home.
Well, and there's also seasons. So I think you have to define roles in different seasons as well. When you first get married, everything's up for grabs, right?
Yeah.
So you really have to do a defining there. Then, a baby comes along, even pregnancy. When a woman is pregnant, there's going to be a change in her energy levels and what she's able to do. And so maybe it's like, what? I know I'm the one who does dinner every night, but I'm too tired right now. Can you take that role until this time? And then knowing, okay, once baby arrives, new season, we got to redefine the roles. What are we doing now? Once you get kids in school, all those things, really taking time to recognize where you're at and what season you're in and what you need and what your spouse needs eliminates so many fights and so much unnecessary conflict.
Right. And I think someone told us a long time ago that, marriage is a covenant, but every season requires a new contract. So there's a re-upping, when a season changes, we re-up the contract. Hey, what is this? Hey, we're obviously entering into a new season. Kids are teenagers, having a baby, change of job, change of city, change of whatever it is, sickness enters, things like that. And we renegotiate what this looks like. There is a ton of compromise and conversation that's required for us to stay connected.
And it makes me think of us personally. Like maybe you have heard, I do this cousin camp with all my nieces and nephews. They come out for the summer and I keep them here at the house, 10 of teenagers, for about a month or so in the summer. And that's a month that requires a new contract. So a couple weeks prior to cousin camp, it's like, okay, let's reevaluate what we're going to need from each other. Look, everything's going to look different. I'm not going to be as available to do A, B, and C. Can you fill in those things? And also, like, we're not going to get the connection time that we are used to. So let's just verbally make an agreement and talk about the fact that we're not going to get to really connect much over the next month, but I love you, you love me. And what is our plan even after that's over to reconnect? Because that's really important too. If you're going to if you're going to have a super busy season, you're not going to be able to connect, make a plan for how you will reconnect when that season is over. Don't let it just, oh yeah, well, and then we'll figure that out afterwards. You won't figure it out. It won't happen. Yeah. And then in 3 months, you're going to be arguing over something ridiculous because you've lost connection.
And part of that even goes into the next piece for us, which is we really need to clearly not just define our roles in the house, but really really define the hours in which we're going to spend as a couple in work and with the kids. Like if we just leave everything up to sort of, it's going to haphazardly happen however it happens over the course of life. We're not going to be intentional about anything. Every line from work to marriage to kids to church to serving to whatever thousand other things you have, friends, all that stuff starts to blur over each other. And because there's no clearly defined roles in not just your home and who does what in those seasons and all those things, but really in your schedule, it actually has to start to take place as well. And we just heard a stat that said when you have, a couple that has both parents working, both the husband and the wife are in jobs, that the average that they spend together, intentional time together every week, just literally connecting, is 30 minutes a week. When in reality, what we actually need is 90 minutes a day. Is that correct?
90 minutes a week of intentional time.
Right. So you're getting a third of what you actually need just to survive.
And what does that 90 minutes look like? That 90 minutes isn't sitting at a table having dinner together. That 90 minutes is connecting heart to heart. So spending time talking about, where are you? How are you feeling? What is your struggles? What's happening in your week? Really intentional time. And that's hard to do, which is one of our points as well. Dedicating, what did we call this? Dedicating time together.
Yeah,
so
it's
date
literally,
night.
yeah.
Date nights are important. There were many seasons where we did not have the ability to do a date night. We had young children. We have a, situation with our kids. It was hard to find childcare all the time. So you have to be creative with stuff like that. So sometimes it's after the kids go to bed, no cell phones, no TV, no book, just intentionally sitting and talking and connecting together, holding hands, sitting close to each other on a couch. Those things really help fill the love tanks in your marriage.
Well, yeah, we're talking about non-sexual touch and we're talking about intentional communication. This dedicated kind of time together, which we didn't do at first. I mean, and it led to tons of misunderstandings and frustrations, and it just led to all this complete dysfunction. And you end up, I guess one of the things that I've heard recently, they talk about like how you just end up in roommate syndrome. So we're totally checking off the to-do list. I mean, the to-do list is getting done. The kids are getting taken care of. They're getting to the places they need to get done. Bills are getting paid. We're showing up at all the stuff. We got church, we got events, we got friends, we got family, we got everybody. We got it all. We're running around like crazy people and we got it all on lock. The problem is there's no deep connection here. So by the time the kids get to an age where they don't need as much attention anymore, they're actually living sort of their own integrated lives. They're actually living their own separate identities from the family. Then all of a sudden you're left with this person 20 some years down the road going, this is going to be a lot of work to figure out how to reconnect now that we've got 20 years of history and most of it is not great because we have no history. We don't really have anything together except for roommates. And there's a large percentage of people who end up in this space where the kids are now growing and they're like, I don't know if I want to do the next season with you because I don't even know you. And it's just going to be easier to get rid of all the trauma and start over.
Which is why I think the time spent together has to be so strategic.
Oh,
I know in the beginning, like you and I, we would do date nights or we would try to spend time together. We'd end up like silently sitting at dinner and then silently walking through a store. It's like, okay, we did our date night, why isn't our marriage great? We're doing a date night every week. And so then we gave it up because it was like, oh, that doesn't work. And then we had more kids and there was all that too. But I think the difference is now when we have time to spend together, we really try to intentionally engage with one another's hearts. What are you processing right now? Where is your heart? What are you excited about? And this is the cool thing is we didn't have this, but now they have you can go online on Amazon and find like boxes and books and games and all kind of things that have questions that you can ask your spouse to get to know them a little better. Those are amazing resources and tools because sometimes it can be awkward. I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to say. These type of tools I think really can help.
Yeah, I mean the biggest tool is learning how to ask questions. This is what we do at fight weekends. This is what we do with the marriage weekends. This is what we do in sparring sessions. This is what we do in all the stuff that we're doing. We are helping people learn how to ask curious questions in a way that builds deep connection. And that has been the greatest gift that we've had is time together doing that. And we've stumbled through it and we've messed it up a million times and asked it wrong and didn't know the language, but we kept going after that time together being used to ask questions that would help us get to know each other better. And that is the game changer for me.
Yeah, so I would say if you haven't attended any of our stuff and you don't know and you're kind of just trying to feel this out, how does this work? I'm going to ask my spouse a question and then they respond. What do I say? Here would be my first bit of advice. Be curious. Be curious about your spouse. Simple questions like how, when they tell you, oh, how, well, this is what happened. The kids did this and da, 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 da. Well, how did that make you feel? That is a profound question to ask somebody. And then generally be curious about their response. Really? Oh, that made you feel that way. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to change them. You don't need to offer some great advice. Really makes this process a lot easier when all you have to do is just continue to ask questions and engage with them.
Yeah.
They will feel seen, heard, loved, and your connection will be much better because of it.
So we're on the last one. This is it.
Which was
preferring and delighting.
No, there's one other thing I don't think that we
No, that
added
was it.
to the last one, though, that I want to say.
Oh, you want to say more about the
I thought
dedicated
that was,
time?
yeah. Also, if you are a parent or if you are in ministry or you have a very highly demanding job, make time in your schedule to discuss these things independently of each other. Your kids need to be talked about. You need to be on the same page with how you parent, and that can't be included in that 90 minutes of connection time. That 90 minutes of connection time is heart connection between you and your spouse. We also need time in our schedule to talk about the kids. How are we disciplining this? How are we going to engage with, have you noticed one of our kids is feeling a little withdrawn? Like, what is our plan of attack for engaging with that child? Oh, how are things going with school? Have we noticed that the homework's dropping off? Who wants to step in and take, the responsibility for that? It is so important to connect in your parenting, because what happens if not, especially if you have teenagers or really smart young kids, which I think we all do, they find a way to get in between the two of us and manipulate the situation. So now we are fighting with each other and we've forgotten the problems we have with them. And that's not good for your kids and it's not good for your marriage. So setting aside 30 minutes a week or whatever that is for you to go, okay, this is time where we talk about the kids and in that time also, what do we want for their futures? Like, you're setting a legacy for your children. Yeah. What do you want for them in 5 years? What are the points that you're wanting to teach them, or things that you feel like they really should be learning and growing in right now? And what role should you as a mom take with your son, and what role should you as a father take with your daughter, and vice versa? And having an opportunity to communicate that together is profoundly beautiful for your children. And remember, that's what we're doing this for, right? Also, I would say this was another thing that was great advice that was given to us when we were younger, is if you both are in ministry, or even if one of you is in ministry, you're both in ministry. You
Congratulations.
Now or if you're running a business together, because a lot of couples are doing that too.
Yep.
Dedicate time to talk shop. Because obviously there's just a million little pieces and balls that are being thrown around all the time. And what happens, it will get just inundated into every part of your day and your life. And you feel like you're never not working. You're never not doing ministry. So separate some time out. Hey, Mondays at 3:00, we sit down for an hour and we do our calendaring. We talk about all the problems and the things and how are we going to handle the business or the ministry or whatever. We get it all out of the way. And then we establish, okay, now for the rest of the day, ministry's off the table. Or it's like every day at 6:00, ministry, work off the table. Establish what those things are for your marriage. You might be thinking, wow, this is that takes a lot. I don't have that much time in my week to be spending 30 minutes a week talking about my kids and an hour talking about this and, 2 hours with my my spouse. Change your life. Do you want a marriage or do you want a job? I'm hoping that you want a marriage and kids, because if that's what you want, it takes time. So this is your big wake up call coming from me right now. Change your life if you don't have enough time to dedicate to your children, to your spouse, and to whatever all those other task needs are. You will end up looking back and going, oh, I spent my time doing the wrong things if you don't.
Yeah, because if you look back at the kids that, so many of us have met, so many of us have had conversations with, they didn't need a dad who worked 60 hours and got them the thing. They actually just needed a dad in the room. They didn't need parents who were busy doing 20 other things. They actually just needed their presence in the room. The conversations have to happen. And if we're not intentional about our lives will control us instead of us controlling it. It will lead us to places we do not want to go because we're not being intentional anywhere. And if you realistically look at this and you break down the time, you're not talking more than an hour a day with all of these things. I mean, obviously not just an hour a day, break it into chunks, but over the course of a week, you're looking at like an hour a day or so to actually be able to do this really, really well. And the truth is, I don't care if you're tired. I tell men this all the time, like, well, that sucks. That's hard. You work a hard job to come home and do a hard job. And that is the way we're supposed to do life together. And then when we do this well, I guess that's the best part about being married for 21 years now, is now that we have these rhythms because we've done the work, there are areas that are actually a lot more in sync and a lot more in rhythm because we did the work. And yes, that is possible for your marriage and your connection and your family. If you do the work, you will set yourself up for success. If you decide not to do the work, the sacrifice will be your kids and your marriage. That's up to you, but you get to choose that.
My last little thing I was thinking as you were
Nope.
talking, it's like, I feel like we kind of had this, like, oh, you need to schedule out these things, blah, blah, blah. And our life has always been spaghetti, like everything every week is different,
Very
especially because you didn't have a traditional 9-to-5 job and we homeschooled. And so it was just a mess. And we would get very discouraged. We're not doing it because we can't, like, we missed it this week. And
Yeah.
you know what? If your life is like that, that's okay. So maybe, 1 week it's on Monday at 2:00 and the next week it's on a Thursday that you guys connect and go. You don't need to actually have the same day every week for the rest of your life. That has adjusted and changed for us so many times. And again, in seasons, certain seasons things work and certain seasons they don't. It's more the intention behind it and that we're both shooting for a goal, knowing that we're on the same team and we both want this, which leads to preferring your spouse.
Yes.
There is something which is on there for our point number 5, prefer.
Of our top 5 things we've learned in 21 years.
Yes. Preferring and delighting.
Mm-hmm.
There is something deep inside of every one of us who is yearning for delight.
Yep.
And we get to give that to our spouses. We get to give them delight, that we delight when they walk in the room. We delight when we pick up the phone and it's their voice on the other end. That is a beautiful gift that we get to give each other in marriage.
You will be amazed at the transformation in your spouse if you delight in them when they walk into the room.
I just saw this like TikTok social media thing where the wife did an experiment on her husband. Every time he walked in from work, she like jumped up and gave him a huge hug, and how it just changed their marriage. Yep. Just the simple act of delight. When he walked in the front door after work, going up and giving him a hug and saying, I love you, before the chaos of kids and dinner and all the stuff that's happened in the day.
Well, yeah, because we mostly want to make preferring and delighting these massive things. Like we want to make them these huge, like, well, I'm going to take you on a trip and we're going to go on this huge vacation and I'm saving up for this thing. And it's like, No, we can do little things every single day to delight in our spouse. It costs you nothing, and it literally is 30 seconds to enjoy the person when they come back home when you've been separated for the day. That is not only what we should be doing for our spouse, but that will trickle down into our children. Every like the people that we say we love should see delight on our faces and hear it in our voices when they enter our orbit, when they enter our sphere of influence. They should see us light up because they exist. They don't have to perform for it. They didn't have to do anything right before, like Nicci said, before all the distractions and all the chaos begins, we just find delight in them. And the next layer of that is we begin to build a lifestyle that shows that we prefer them above everything else we could be involved with.
And what does preferring look like?
Preferring could be everything from your schedule to your heart towards this person. If I have the opportunity to do 5 things and they'd be really amazing or great, or there's something I like to do, or it's a hobby that I like to participate in, but I can see that my spouse actually needs my time and attention in this season or in this day, I choose them. We choose them over any other opportunity we have. I got an email from someone just recently, someone that reached out and was like, hey, I have this opportunity to do this thing, and I'm supposed to go on this mission trip and do this stuff and do X, Y, Z, and this is all the stuff that's happening, and I don't think my spouse wants me to go. And so, like, have you ever been in a spot where you turned things down for Nicci? And I'm like, yeah, not only have I turned them down for our family, to be home with our family, but I've left in the middle of things. Like, I get a call from my wife, I get a call from my kids, and it doesn't have to be death and destruction. I have to hear in their voice that little thing that says, I need you right now. And that is enough to drop everything I'm doing and pursue my family. And if you're not in a place where you're going to do that, then you're never going to, this is the best way I can say it, is you're never going to get the depth of intimacy and the depth of trust you actually want in the relationship, because there will always be something that's more important than them. And you will if you choose it enough times, they will stop asking. If you choose other things over them enough times, they will stop looking for connection with you because they know it's not available. And if it's available for 5 minutes, they know the moment you get another opportunity, you're going to choose it. So they'll stop putting themselves in a place to get hurt. And you'll wonder why the connection is broken 5 months, 5 years down the road.
So I guess the question would be, does your spouse know that they are more important to you than your children?
That's a big one.
Than your parents?
There's another big one.
And your sisters and your brothers? Than your friends? Than your job? Do they know your hobbies? Do they know that you would choose them over any of those things? And if the answer is yes, then you are preferring your spouse. And if the answer is no, I'm going to say that you probably have some issues you have to work through in your marriage because your spouse is sitting at home hurt right now.
Right. And I would say that delight is the pathway to preference. Like, I think that's why these two go together, because if you want them to choose you, show them in really beautiful, small, intentional ways that you delight in them. Because who doesn't want to be around someone that delights in them? That's the beauty of delight, is when you know you're delighted in, you want to put your life as close to that as possible. So that's why it changed this, in my opinion, changed this woman's life that did this thing on social media. Because I'm like, well, duh, what husband is it when he walks in the door and gets received with a hug and a kiss and celebration every time he walks in the door? Who doesn't want to spend more time around that? You know, and if you're both at each other's throats all the time, choosing other things because you'd rather be separated, then that's going to play out in your intimacy. It's going to play out in your sex life. It's going to play out in your conversations. And it's going to trickle down to how your kids not only treat each other, but treat you.
That's true.
So those are our 5 things, babe. That was it. All 5 of them. It was, accepting there's going to be hard times, commitment to growth, clearly defining roles, preferring and delighting, and making sure that you have dedicated time for the specific things that need dedicated time for in your relationship together. So
that's
guys,
it. Nothing. It's as easy, you guys. Piece of cake.
So don't worry. Good luck.
You got it.
You got it. No worries. 21 years in, we're professionals.